Hey guys, MJK here. Just wanted to talk about some upcoming units that have been data mined. We don't know necessarily exactly when they're coming, but my guess, of course, is that it's coming on Thursday, just as it usually does. As you'll notice here on the unit shards page, we don't have a preview of what's coming up. We don't have a sneak peek. So in order to figure out what's coming next, it will have to come from data mines, which is up on Reddit. I'll give you guys a link to that. But I have made some slides to talk about the units, what's good about them, what their setups might be. So let's go ahead and jump right to that. All right, so the first unit we're going to talk about is Speaka, who is a light unit. And if you happen to catch my tier list video the other day, you might have noticed that light units don't have necessarily a lot of strong attackers. So she's going to be a very welcome addition to the meta. She is fairly strong and tanky right away because of that job 1 being warrior, which is basically the axe job that Sita has. And, you know, of course, that presents some AoE and ranged options, as well as the job 3, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. There is some decent mobility available as well, because while warrior only starts off with 3 move and 1 jump, which is kind of limiting, the job 2 thief gives you move +1, which is, you know, pretty readily available, not too hard to get. And 4-1 is actually not that bad at all. She is future-proof as well, because she starts out pretty strong, but in the future, she's going to get some pretty strong enhancements, and that's going to actually jump her up into the top tier, even in Japan right now. Yes, I am talking about Japan tier lists and stuff like that, because I know that it is of interest to people, and people want to invest in things that are, you know, going to pay off in the long term as well. So she is future-proof. In fact, the most future-proof unit out of the batch coming up. She also has a strong leader skill, which is the inverse of Ryle, meaning that she gives 30% HP and 20% attack for light units, which is going to be really good for, you know, all light unit parties that aren't necessarily focused on pure physical attack. Maybe you have some supports in there or even tanks that you want to have that extra HP on. So this is a good leader skill. The weaknesses are that she does have limited jump or height movement until job 3, which is Dragon Cavalier. So until then, she's going to be stuck at pretty much 1 move, because you're not going to use Thief anyway. The attack is going to be pretty much where it is. There's no way to buff it up. There's no charge up or anything like that. But it is going to be fairly solid anyway. And she is relatively slow, because both the Warrior and Dragon Cavalier jobs are slow jobs because they are strong. And again, Thief is fast, but she's not going to be using Thief at any point, pretty much. So for the non-whale setup, this is a new kind of feature that I'm going to introduce into these new unit reviews, because I know a lot of people want to know whether they'll be viable right off the bat, or whether they have to go all the way up to job 3 to be viable. So you can judge for yourself with these setups. The non-whale setup does require job 1 and job 2. And if you only have job 1, you pretty much have like 80% of it, so don't worry too much. Of course, you're going to be using Axe as your main job, basic Axe as your sub-skill. The reactive ability will be Revenge, because this is basically an improved version of like your typical counter. So this has a proc rate of up to 50%, which is pretty solid. Job 1, Chopping Spirit. This is one of the best passes in the game, so you definitely want to use this. This is 20% HP and attack at max level, so that's really, really good. And then if you get that job 2, you know, 1 extra dupe of Speaka, you get that move +1, which will help her mobility a lot. And that's actually, you know, kind of covering one of the weaknesses of the warrior job in general. So pretty solid, even from just job 2, and, you know, definitely usable. But if you do go all the way with job 3, aka the whale setup, you would probably want to use the Dragon Cavalier job as your main instead, which is called Ancient Dragon. Now for the subskill, you do have a couple of options here. You have basic Axe, which you can use if you are not planning on doing any kind of jumps. You don't want to deal with that like charge up time or whatever. You can use basic Axe, and that gives you some decent options, especially Tomahawk, which is a ranged attack. And then also there's some like, you know, spin around, hit enemies around you kind of move, but basically you'd use it for Tomahawk, I think. So those are your 2 options there. Job 3, reactive ability, HP drain +2 is your best bet once you get up that far, because it's guaranteed, and it also helps keep her alive by draining back a portion of any HP that she loses from a basic attack. So that's a very good reactive ability. And then you still want to use Chopping Spirit, because as I said, it's a very good passive. And then again, for the last passive, it's going to depend on whether you chose to use basic Axe where you would use move +1, or if you decide to use basic Ancient Dragon and jump around with her, then you'd want to use Sky High for that extra damage. Useful abilities are Leap Slash. That's kind of like that big cross-shape jump attack that we've seen from Sita. It's a very strong attack, but it is a little bit gimmicky, and meaning that you need to know when to use it, when the timing is right. Because, you know, if they're lined up in a certain way, it could be like the best move ever, or it could just be like they move out of the way all the time. So it depends. Tomahawk is a nice ability from the basic axe where you basically have 3 range, and it doesn't have to be in a straight line. You can do it kind of in an L shape as well. Grand Cross, of course, is that mega attack from the Dragon Cavalier job, which is the cross shape that goes really far in all 4 directions around the character. One of the best attacks in the game, probably the best attack in the game. Dragon Slayer, which is a nice line attack. Dragon Breath, which is a kind of AoE, 6 squares, you know, in front of you kind of ability, which is nice to have that option. Revenge Crush, which is a powerful single target attack in the axe job, and that depends on how low your HP is. You might actually end up doing a lot of damage that way. And then Blade Cyclone, just in case you're surrounded or happen to position yourself, that could be a nice attack as well. Her tier placement, as she comes out in global, my guess is going to be that she's S tier. She's essentially like on the level of Rosa. So Rosa might have extra mobility because she has the ninja stealth. But it's only really 1 extra jump than Speaka, so in most cases you're not really going to feel that because the jump is so high anyway with Dragon Cavalier. Also, Rosa is going to have Overdrive, which is 30% attack, but there is a defensive penalty, of course, whereas Speaka has Chopping Spirit, which is less attack at 20%, but it's a 20% HP buff, so she sacrifices some attack, some damage for that extra HP, which is a nice trade if you ask me. So yeah, she's solidly in the S tier ranking, I think. In Japan, she is SS tier currently because she did get a number of enhancements and stuff, but she's not gonna get that in global for a while. So for now, she's gonna be S tier, very solid. Viable from job 1 and 2, but ideally you wanna have job 3 for her. ASWALD, and this is all subject to translation changes, so keep that in mind. The name might not be exactly ASWALD, but that's what it is for now. This is introducing a new job into global completely. The job's going to be called Assassin, and it's a very strong class. It's a very strong job. So she's going to get that right off from job 1, which is really good, and this makes her a very non-whale, free-to-play friendly unit. So she is a base 5-star, but she starts off really good even at job 1. She has double dark element, which means that she will do even extra damage against light units, but if she's up against somebody who has resistance to dark, that can be a little bit of a drawback, but I think in most cases it's kind of a good thing. She's very fast and mobile, meaning that she has high agility, and she has good move and jump, which she starts out at 4-4, so you can't complain about that. She's capable of ranged status inflicting with her like throwing daggers or assassination blades, or she can go up close and do really strong burst damage with her backstabs and sharpness ability, which we can talk about in just a little bit. So she's pretty versatile. You don't have to necessarily stay away, and if you're up close you can do strong damage as well, or you can play her safe. There's a lot of flexibility with the way you play her. You also have an evasion build possible with her, meaning that she could have very high evasion. If you're used to, you know, Bolt or Twin Blade Swordsman in general, you know, you kind of know what to expect from that evasion build. It can definitely save your skin in a number of cases, although it's not something you want to lean too heavily upon. And she has a strong leader skill for dark attackers, which is 40% attack and 5% evasion for dark units. Her weaknesses are lack of attack passives and buffs, meaning that she doesn't have anything like a charge up, and she also doesn't have anything like an overdrive or a single blade to really get her attack up there. But she's still going to be pretty solid as well. She is, again, subject to RNG with that evasion and everything, which means that she is still semi-squishy against light units. Again, dark and light is kind of a unique thing in this game where they do a lot of damage against each other. So when you're fighting light enemies, you may want to bring dark, you know, for that extra damage, but at the same time, that means she's vulnerable to getting killed, and her evasion doesn't necessarily save her all the time with that. She's not super squishy. I mean, she has decent HP and everything, but you know, you can expect the durability of someone like a Bolt. You know, like you want to get in there, do as much damage as you can as quickly as possible, because you can't stand in there and tank a bunch of hits. Her non-whale setup is basically, you know, what you would expect. Her job 1 and job 2 is kind of mixed in there equally. You want to use her assassin skills for both the main and the sub skill. And we'll talk about some of the abilities specifically in just a little bit. Perfect evasion is her reactive ability. That's just for the extra 10% evasion to help keep her alive. But there is the option of using the assassin reactive ability as well, which is, I think it's called something like Stance of Ida, something or other. And what it does is when she gets hit, she gets 20 CT. And what that does is it helps her to get her next turn faster, because you basically have to get up to 100 CT to, you know, act, and you know, so you can kind of get a feel for how quickly that'll help her out. Job 1 passive Dark Walk is really good, because that's exactly the same as Ninja Stealth, meaning move +1, jump +1. So yeah, that can of course make her very mobile as well, which is useful for her because you want to get in and out sometimes. And then job 2 passive Feint, which gives her 20% evasion, I believe. So she starts off with a natural 5% evasion. Once you get that perfect evasion and Feint in there, that's an extra 30%. Plus her leader skill, if she happens to be the leader, that's up to like 40% evasion. So that's one way to kind of keep her safe. If you happen to get all her jobs unlocked, you'll notice that the whale build is actually not that different from her non-whale setup. The only difference is that with her job 3, which is Gunner, which is a basic job, not that great, you do have the option of using long shot, so that all of her kind of dagger throwing moves, which are called Assassination Blades, all of those get 1 extra range. And you'll kind of know what I'm talking about if you happen to use like Sabaretta. He had that same option with his Hunter passive and like his throwing daggers. It doesn't affect the basic attacks or anything like that, but it does affect those thrown weapons. So again, the whale setup is not that different from the non-whale setup, so this is a very free-to-play friendly unit. Useful abilities, Shadows, I think that's what the translation is calling it right now, but it could definitely change when it comes to global. This is basically a backstab type of move that ignores defense, and obviously you can see the benefit of that. It might be called backstab, I don't know. Sharpness, which is basically the same thing, but this actually goes up to a 200% multiplier, which is insane. And it does extra damage against humans, I believe 50%, and it ignores defense, and it raises her agility by 80% at max level. So this is a crazy good move. The only downside to this, of course, is that it's a 50 joule move, so it is expensive to use, but if you're able to get it off, this is the best single target move in the game. It even beats out Supreme Battle Trance, which is 150% multiplier and does extra damage against humans. This one does up to 200% and has all those other extra advantages as well. So really, really good move there. Void Empty is a move where she basically hits stuff around her, and she buffs up her agility, I believe. No, I'm sorry. She buffs up her evasion by up to 50 until her next turn. So this is a nice move if you happen to be surrounded and you can keep yourself relatively safe. When you're getting that 50 evasion plus her 40 that's already on there, you know, she's going to be really hard to hit. And then Assassination Blade, which is basically all of her basic assassin skills. They're all kind of the same range and everything. The only difference is that they do different status ailments on the enemies. So I would prefer the paralysis one, sleep, and attraction, which is probably just going to be called charm in global. So those are all useful as well. Her tier placement is going to be S when she comes out in global, I think, because, you know, like a Bolt, she can dish out some good damage, but she has to rely on her evasion, and she's not necessarily the most tanky unit there is. But I do think she's going to stay alive a little easier than someone like Bolt because of that, you know, the ability to raise up her evasion even more, all these agility buffs that she can do on herself and everything. It's just going to make her go even faster and clear out any danger. So yeah, she's going to be a little bit more survivable, I think. And she does good damage. The only thing holding her back again is that her attack is somewhat limited. And in Japan, she's a S tier currently because she does fall off a little bit later with the meta getting, you know, stronger and power creep, but then she gets some improvements and everything, just like you would expect over time. So those improvements bring her back up to the S tier. Oops, I don't know how that got in there. Carol is our last unit that we're going to talk about, and again, we're pretty familiar with these jobs, and I think that, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. She is the first light machinist, so second light ranged overall after Ryle, so this is going to be pretty useful on those mono light teams, especially because her her leader skill is a general leader skill. This raises missile attack by 20% for the whole party, I believe, if I'm translating that correctly. So that's going to be just like a Karis leader skill, which is useful. I mean, there's a lot of cases where you'd want to have like an all sniper and machinist team, and you know, you can clear out story easily that way and so forth. I saw an EX4 auto team, and they were all snipers or machinists mixed in there, so obviously that leader skill is going to be useful. She does obviously have good ranged and auto AoE attacks, and she can be a strong support if you get her up to job 3, which are kind of like the two main jobs for her, which is a plus and a minus. So I said weaknesses wise, she has a weird combination of jobs, if you consider job 1 and job 3 being like really different from each other, and the synergy is imperfect, but it does mean that she's a little bit more versatile than your typical unit as well. So her non-whale setup is basically how you would set up any machinist. The only difference there is that I would recommend Hawkeye as her first passive, which is her job 2 passive from Hunter, and that gives you 1 extra range. That 1 extra range can be very important, not only to for ease of use, but also to kind of keep your distance and stay safer. And then her other passive, you can choose between booster +2 if you want that extra agility, or you can go with tune up +2 if you want that extra damage. It's really up to you. If you're stuck at job 1, you don't have a dupe or anything, all job 1 passives are just fine as well. Her whale setup, and I did this just to really contrast between her machinist job. It doesn't mean that this is necessarily better. If you do happen to get her job 3 and you want to use her as a merchant, you can use salesman skill, of course, which is a very good support job. Not only can you give jewels to your teammates, you can also use jewel investment, which feels very much like an overclock. Basically, it's instant cast, which is an advantage over overclock, but it charges up the CT by 50 instead of 100. So if the unit that you're using it on is kind of halfway through waiting for her turn or his turn, then it'll feel just like an overclock. Like it'll just immediately get their turn. But if they had just acted and then you do this on them, they're still gonna have to wait a few turns. So there's like pros and cons versus overclock with this. I don't know if I said overcharge before, that's not what I meant. And then basic salesman skill, this is basically for like cure delivery. You can cure allies around you, and there's some good options in there. And then, and also there's like a vaccine type of ability as well, which is obviously useful. You would still want to use reactive armor because, you know, you want to keep her safe. As either a ranged unit or a support unit, she's not going to have the best survivability, so reactive armor helps out in that regard. Booster +2 for sure, because, you know, more agility means more actions, which is going to be useful. And then her last passive, I would suggest Not Too Bad, which gives more jewels per hit. I think this outweighs the benefits of the other passive where you start out with like 10 more jewels or whatever, because 10 more jewels starting out, it's not really going to help you really in a huge way, because she does start out with a good number of jewels as a salesman. I'm sorry, as a what's it called? A merchant anyway. Merchants start out with good jewel count, so that starting jewels it's not really going to help you that much. So I would prefer Not Too Bad for the long run. Her useful abilities are, of course, the typical machinist abilities that you would expect: bombshell, dynamic buster bomb, craft bomb. And then the other ones would be the merchant-related job abilities called jewel investment, which is kind of like your overclock again. Low or full leverage, which is how you give jewels to your teammates, and you know, low gives you less, full gives you more. And then cure delivery, which cures your allies around you. And of course, there's that vaccine type of ability as well, which I don't remember the name of currently off the top of my head. Tier placement, I think it's a solid S tier, because that's pretty much where machinists and merchants fall right now. And then in Japan, she is currently S tier as well because, again, she got some improvements, I think like a job plus. So yeah, all of these units have long-term viability. They're either S or SS tier in Japan, and as they come out in global, they're all, in my estimation, are S tier. So this is a very solid banner through and through, and depending on your needs, I think it's a very solid must pull. Which kind of feels like everything has been a must pull lately, but they've been giving us a lot of good units. One extra thing to mention is that I put that in there as a joke. I didn't realize I was going to go back. Okay, so another thing to mention, and this came from Game and a couple of others I saw on Reddit as well. Now that they've introduced the Assassin job into global, this means that basically they can bring out Setsuna. Because the way that it seems to work now is that anytime they introduce a new job into global, they want to put it on the job one so that everybody has access to it, everybody can see what it's like. And then from that point on, that job can come out again in any other job, like job 2, job 3. And Setsuna has Assassin as job 3. So now that we've seen, what's it called, Blade Master on someone like Sakura, now that we've seen Assassin on ASWALD coming out, those two jobs are no longer new, and we'll see that on Setsuna coming out soon. So I'm hoping that she comes out soon. My win shards are ready. But yeah, that was just a side note. Hope you guys found this useful. And yeah, let me know if you're going to pull for it, how badly you want these units, which ones you want the most. Again, I kind of want them all, but if I had to choose one, I'd probably go for ASWALD because Assassin's a new job. It's a very unique kind of, it's a unique job. I think it's very different from what we've had in the past. And I'd also want Speaka as well because, like I said, we're pretty limited in strong light units and light attackers in general. So I'd want her as well. God, that damn Dilga. Carol is going to be useful because we're limited in light ranged units, like I mentioned, but we've had plenty of machinists, and we also have a merchant in Aruba who I've been using. So she's like the third priority for me, but that doesn't mean that she's not good. I mean, all of them are good. They're all equally viable right off the bat. So yeah, good banner. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope this new format was useful for you guys. I try to think of like what would people want to know when new units are coming out, and I hope I nailed it a little bit. So yeah, let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Peace.